What would you do if the person you loved most became the one who hurt you the deepest? My name is Eleanor Walsh, and I never imagined I'd be fighting not just for my dignity, but for my freedom. This story isn't easy to tell, but if you're watching, stay with me. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I always thought growing old would come with a quiet kind of wisdom, afternoons with tea, birds in the backyard, maybe finally finishing a book or two. What I didn't expect was that growing old could feel like being erased, one decision at a time. I'm Eleanor Walsh, I'm 8 years old, and until a few months ago, I lived alone in the house my husband Richard and I built together in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Every flower in the front yard had a story. The kitchen still smelled like his coffee. I wasn't ready to leave. I didn't need to leave. I had slipped on a throw rug in the living room. Not badly, just a few bruises. I was still sharp, still walking, still me. But that single fall became all the ammunition my son Daniel needed. The next morning, he showed up early and there was something in his eyes I couldn't place, cold, distant. He didn't even ask how I was. He came in carrying a briefcase, speaking in bullet points. "Mom, we found a really good facility. It's time. It's best for everyone." I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. "Daniel," I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm fine. This is my home." He had already made the arrangements. My things were packed, the paperwork signed. I stood in the hallway, watching two strangers move my boxes. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. I tried to argue, tried to fight back. But the look in his eyes, like I was some kind of project, a burden to manage, made the words catch in my throat. "You fell," he said. "You could have broken your hip. You live alone. It's too risky. And frankly, I don't have time to keep checking in on you." It wasn't cruelty in his voice. It was efficiency. That somehow made it worse. They took me in a van. I wasn't even allowed to ride in his car. I remember the silence, deep, cold silence that settled into my bones as we drove away from the only life I knew. The facility was clean, modern, with big windows and neutral walls. But it smelled faintly of bleach, and something else I can only describe as abandonment. A silence you can't understand unless you've lived it. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed in the room they assigned me. My name was on a label stuck to the door, like I was a package, a misplaced item someone had decided to store away. I waited for Daniel to say something, maybe an apology, maybe reassurance. But all he said was, "I'll check in later this week. Don't worry, Mom, you'll be comfortable here." Then he left. Just like that. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there, looking around. The walls were bare. My belongings were reduced to a suitcase. The home I had filled with memories now lived only in my mind. I wasn't old enough to forget things, but I was old enough to be forgotten. That night, I lay in a bed that wasn't mine, listening to the soft buzz of fluorescent lights in the hallway. I thought about Richard, about how we used to laugh at the idea of growing old apart, promising we'd always take care of each other. And now he was gone. And my son had put me away as if I were nothing, but I wasn't nothing. Not yet. Something stirred inside me that night, a flicker I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, but a quiet defiance. They thought I was finished. They had no idea what I was about to do. I stared at the ceiling until morning, planning everything. The next day, I woke to the soft wheels rolling down the hallway, med carts I'd later learn, and the occasional shuffle of feet. The kind of place where even time seemed medicated. My door was slightly open and I could hear someone coughing in the room next to mine. The smell of scrambled eggs and over-boiled coffee drifted in. I dressed slowly, each movement a quiet reminder that I still had control over something, anything. When I stepped into the hallway, I was met with polite nods and tight smiles from the staff. Not warmth, not recognition, just routine. I had become part of the furniture. The common area buzzed with muted conversations and the background noise of a television. No one looked up. No one asked my name. Some stared blankly at game shows. Others dozed with untouched plastic cups of juice by their sides. I stood there, invisible in plain sight. I found a corner by the window and sat down. The sky was gray. A squirrel hopped along the fence and paused to peer inside. For a moment, I envied it, free to run wherever it pleased, no paperwork required. Daniel didn't call that day, or the next. It wasn't until the fourth day that he appeared. His shirt tucked in like he'd come straight from work, which, knowing him, he probably had. He sat across from me in the lounge, not even pretending to meet my eyes. "I brought your insurance documents," he said, sliding over a stack I hadn't asked for. "And a few photos for your nightstand." 3 photos. One of him as a child. One of Richard holding baby Daniel. And one of me, cropped out of a family vacation photo like an afterthought. I stared at them, silent. "Is there anything you need?" His voice carried that sharp edge like he wanted to seem kind but hoped I'd say no. I wanted to ask him why. Why this? Why now? Why couldn't he just check in from time to time like a decent son? But I already knew the answer. This was easier. So I said nothing. You're quiet, he observed. I'm thinking, I replied. He shifted, uncomfortable, as if even that small resistance unsettled him. Then he said something I'll never forget. It's not like I don't care, Mom, but you've had your time. Now let me handle things. Had my time? Life doesn't come with an expiration date. As if I had nothing left to live, to offer, to feel, he left after 10 minutes. No hug. No I love you. Just walked away like he had completed a task. The following week passed in a blur. Meals served at scheduled times. Bingo games with prizes that didn't matter. I tried to smile at the other residents, but most were lost in their own silence. Others were too far gone even to remember their names. That's when I realized the cruelest part of this place wasn't the boredom. It was the erasure. They didn't just strip away independence. They stripped away identity. No one here knew I had once worked as a librarian. That I played the piano for Richard every Sunday morning. That I baked pies from scratch and had read every Steinbeck novel twice. To them, I was just a room, a fall risk, another old woman whose time had passed. Until one afternoon, a nurse I hadn't seen before walked in. Clipboard in hand, gentle smile on her face. Her hair was pulled back, scrubbed spotless. But her eyes tired in a way only someone carrying too much for too long could be. Met mine. Mrs. Walsh? She asked. Hi, I'm Marissa. I'll be checking in on you this week, I nodded. She sat down without the usual distance staff kept. Is there anything you want me to know about you? Such a simple question, but no one had asked me that since I arrived. I stared at her, unsure at first, then said, I like crossword puzzles. I make a mean lemon meringue pie. And I still remember the smell of my husband's shaving cream. Marissa smiled. That's good. I'd like to know more, and just like that, something shifted. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't pretending. She saw me. She returned the next day. And the next. We talked, we laughed. She brought me tea from the break room when the dining hall ran out. She called me Eleanor instead of Mrs. Walsh. And she remembered the name of my favorite singer from the 70s. She told me about her daughter, her mother who had Alzheimer's, and working nights to cover extra shifts. She never complained, but her voice carried weight. Slowly, she became the only reason I didn't feel completely invisible. I still missed my house. I missed Richard. And I still felt betrayed. But for the first time since I'd been forced into this place, I wasn't just waiting to fade away. I was watching, listening, learning who was still on my side and who never truly had been. Somewhere in that silence, I began to understand something. This wasn't just a nursing home. This was the stage for a battle I hadn't realized I was about to fight. I started noticing the little things. First, the way staff knocked twice before entering. The way some residents stared at nothing, their stories trapped behind tired eyes. How people stopped asking questions once they decided you were just old. With Marissa, it was different. She saw past the wrinkles, past the scheduled medications, past the chart on the door. She listened when I spoke, not with sympathy, but with respect, as if I still mattered. Every morning, she made time for me, even when she was busy. She'd peek into my room and say, Morning, Eleanor. You good today? Just those few words gave my day purpose. She treated me like a person, not a case file. It had been 2 weeks since Daniel last visited, not that I expected anything. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. No calls, no messages, no check-ins. And yet, there I was, telling stories to a nurse half my age as if she were the only family I had left. Marissa's laugh was warm and real, the kind that caught me off guard. She told me about her little girl, Mia, who had just turned 6, how she loved peanut butter sandwiches and hated going to sleep. She insists I leave the hallway light on, she said one night as we sat by the small garden behind the center. Keeps the nightmares away. I smiled. Smart girl, she replied, voice cracking slightly. Smarter than me most days. She looked away, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. I noticed her hands slightly calloused. Nails short, the hands of someone who had to do everything herself. Later, she told me her mother had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. Marissa was 29 then. She'd taken on to jobs to keep up with bills and had to move her mom into her apartment because she couldn't afford a facility. And your husband? I asked gently. She smiled, but it was hollow. Walked out when I told him I wouldn't put my mom in a home. Said he wasn't ready to carry that kind of weight. I knew the feeling. I carried it every day since Richard passed. That night, I lay in bed thinking about her, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the way she smiled even with the world on her shoulders. And I thought about how little Daniel seemed to understand weight, loyalty, or love. The contrast was unbearable. One morning after breakfast, I asked Marissa if she could help me find my lawyer's number. She blinked, surprised, but didn't question me. She simply nodded, of course. I'll bring you a phone and a quiet place to make the call. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't want to pry, but I knew she sensed something bigger was unfolding. It took less than 5 minutes. My lawyer, James Palmer, had been our family attorney for years. He remembered my voice immediately. I need to make changes to my will, I told him. And I'd like to start paperwork for an adult adoption. There was a pause. Eleanor, are you sure? I had never been more certain. That same afternoon, I wrote 2 letters, one to Daniel, short, cold, factual, and one to Marissa. That one I sealed and hid inside the drawer of my nightstand. I wasn't ready to give it to her yet, but when the time came, I wanted her to know she wasn't just a nurse. She was family now. I didn't tell her that day or the next. Instead, we kept our routine, talking about books, her daughter's spelling, homework, the weather. But something had changed in me. I no longer felt like a passive observer in this place. I had a purpose again, a quiet mission, a legacy to rewrite. Because if Daniel thought he could decide the ending of my story without even asking me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. And I wouldn't need to raise my voice to prove it. It was early October when the leaves outside the facility turned that sharp rust-colored red. I remember staring out the window one morning, watching them fall like paper memories, drifting slowly to the ground. Something about the stillness reminded me of how my life had been slipping away piece by piece. While no one seemed to notice except Marissa, that day, she brought me a cup of chamomile tea. Real chamomile, not the powdered kind. She'd found it at a discount store on her way to work. I thought of you, she said. Smells like something you'd like, and she was right. It smelled like my old kitchen, like Sunday mornings with Richard reading the newspaper. While I baked cinnamon rolls, we sat together by the window, watching the trees sway. She looked more tired than usual, but she still held that soft, steady calmness. That was Marissa's magic. No matter what was going wrong in her life, she made you feel like you were the most important thing in the world for those few minutes. She told me Mia had gotten sick the night before. Fever, sore throat. She'd stayed up all night rubbing her back, giving her water, holding her little hand. It's nothing serious, just a virus, she said. But I could hear the edge in her voice, the exhaustion. The fear that creeps in when you're doing everything alone. Do you ever get a break? I asked. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. I'll rest when she's grown. Right now, she needs me. Something clicked in me then, a knowing. A recognition of everything I'd been feeling. It wasn't just admiration. It was reflection. I saw myself in her. The younger me who once held Daniel through countless sleepless nights. The woman who sacrificed weekends, vacations, promotions, and sleep for her family. The difference? I did all that and ended up in a place like this. But Marissa, she deserved better. Later that day, I called James, my lawyer, again. I finalized the amendment to my will. Half of my estate, the house, the savings, the remaining investments would go to Marissa Carter. No announcement, no drama. Just a quiet legal promise. It was the first time since Richard died that I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Over the next few days, I kept a journal, a real one, leather-bound, with pages that smelled like old bookstores. I wrote letters to Marissa, to Mia, even one to myself. I poured everything into those pages, memories, regrets. The betrayal that still echoed in my mind from Daniel's voice when he said, "You've had your time." Each sentence felt like stitching up a wound. One evening, I invited Marissa to sit with me in the garden behind the facility. The air was cool, the sun sinking behind the trees. I offered her the seat beside me and handed her a small envelope. She blinked. "What's this?" "Not for now," I said. "For when it matters." She looked at me, really looked. "You're not sick, are you?" I laughed softly. "No, dear. I'm just awake now." We sat in silence, our shoulders almost touching. I don't think she realized the magnitude of what had just happened, that I had rewritten my legacy. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because sometimes the people who share your blood aren't the ones who carry your heart. As the light faded and the first stars peeked through the sky, I made peace with something important. If Daniel had given me up, then I had every right to give myself forward to someone who saw me, valued me, and stayed. I didn't know then how quickly everything would unravel, but I felt it even then. A storm was coming, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to stand in the rain. It was well past midnight when I woke to the sound of muffled voices in the hallway. Most nights, the facility fell into a dead quiet after 9 p.m. Lights dimmed. Residents tucked away in their rooms like forgotten books on a dusty shelf. But this night was different. I slipped out of bed, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and opened the door just enough to see the hallway washed in soft yellow light. Down at the far end, near the administrator's office, I saw Daniel. I froze. He was supposed to be out of town. He hadn't visited in weeks. Yet there he stood, tense, speaking sharply to a man in a gray suit, a man I didn't recognize. Their voices were low, but one sentence drifted down the hall like smoke. If she changes, that will. I lose everything. I stepped back into the shadows. The gray-suited man, he had to be a lawyer, sighed. It's her legal right, Daniel. You can't stop her. She's not thinking clearly, Daniel snapped. She's alone, confused, probably being manipulated by some staff member. My blood turned to ice. He was talking about Marissa. I want a psychological evaluation, he said. Something official. If she's declared incompetent, the will can't be changed. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they would hear it. I'm not going to let her hand over my inheritance to some nurse, he hissed. She owes me, owes him. He really believed my life. My savings, my home, everything I'd ever built belonged to him by default. That biology gave him ownership of my entire existence. The lawyer hesitated. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Daniel didn't even pause. Do it. I backed into my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. I didn't know what hurt more, what I'd heard, or the fact that somewhere deep inside, I wasn't even surprised. Daniel had always been calculated, always strategic. But now I saw the truth clearly. He didn't care about my well-being. He cared about control, and that's when something old and cold stirred inside me. I had always wondered about the night Richard died. It had happened so suddenly. He'd been in his office late, going through financial records, while I was out visiting a friend. When I got home, he was already gone. A heart attack, they said. No one there to help, but now... No, I remembered asking Daniel if he'd talked to his father that day. He said no. And suddenly, I didn't believe him. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Daniel didn't know I'd overheard anything. He even smiled a thin, performative smile and handed me a box of herbal teas I hadn't asked for. Thought you'd like these, he said. I nodded and pretended. That afternoon, I pulled aside one of the newer aides, a timid girl named Hannah, and quietly asked if she could find out who'd been working the front desk the night before. She hesitated, then whispered, it was Kristen, but she doesn't talk much. I found Kristen folding laundry in the back hallway. I waited until we were alone. I need to ask you something off the record, I said. She looked up, startled. Okay, you saw my son here last night, didn't you? Kristen paused, then slowly nodded. And he wasn't here to visit me, was he? She swallowed. No, he was in the office for a long time, arguing. Did you hear anything? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Just something about paperwork and getting someone declared unfit. I thanked her and walked away, the weight of it settling on my shoulders like iron. Back in my room, I stared at the photo Daniel had left weeks ago, him as a boy, smiling in his Little League uniform. The child I had raised. The boy I comforted during storms. The teenager I forgave when he lied about grades. The man I defended even when Richard warned me he was becoming too selfish, too cold. I had loved him unconditionally, but love had always been a one-way street. Then memories began to crash over me. Fast and sharp. Richard's last phone call that day. Daniel showing up late to the hospital with dry eyes. No urgency, no grief. Only silence. Had he? I didn't want to finish the thought. But I already knew he hadn't helped his father. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. He had let Richard die because facing the company's debt, the debt Daniel himself helped create, would have cost him too much. And now he was coming for me, too. But I wasn't Richard. And I wasn't going to be erased quietly. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the envelope, the one I'd written for Marissa. It was time to deliver it because war had been declared, and I had no intention of losing. It happened faster than I ever imagined. One moment I was sitting in the garden with Marissa, watching the wind sweep leaves across the path like whispers from another life. And the next, I was being told to pack my things again, only this time, I wasn't being moved to another room or another wing. I was being transferred to a psychiatric unit. The nurse who delivered the message was new, polite, but mechanical. She spoke as if she were reading straight from a menu. Double quotes, Mrs. Walsh. The attending physician has recommended a transfer for observation. A few days, just to ensure your safety. Safety from what? I asked. She blinked. There have been concerns about confusion, some unusual conversations, possible signs of delusion. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You mean me realizing my son's a vulture? She didn't answer. 10 minutes later, two orderlies appeared with a wheelchair. I told them I didn't need it. They said it was protocol. I didn't fight them, not because I accepted what was happening, but because I knew resistance would only feed the lie. If I raised my voice, I'd be labeled irrational. If I refused to cooperate, they'd call it evidence. So I stayed calm. They wheeled me down a hallway I'd never noticed before, through a locked door with a security code I didn't know. When it clicked shut behind me, something inside me cracked. The air was different, sterile, heavy. The walls were a muted green that felt more like a prison than a hospital. No photos, no music. Just the low hum of despair. My new room was even smaller. A bed bolted to the floor. A single window with safety glass. No sharp objects, no phone. No Marissa, I asked the nurse with the tired eyes and tight bun how long I'd be kept here. Until the evaluation is complete, she said. And who ordered it? She hesitated just long enough to tell me everything. Your son made the request, she said finally, with a supporting statement from Dr. Levin. Dr. Levin, the medical director I'd spoken to 3 times in my entire life. And never about anything meaningful. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to contain the fire building in my chest. So this was Daniel's next move. He couldn't undo the will on his own. But if I were declared mentally unfit, legally incompetent, then everything I had worked so hard to protect could be overturned. And I would be silenced, locked away. That first night in the room was the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I barely moved. The lights outside stayed on through the night, spilling under the door like a spotlight. They brought me pills. I refused. They tried coaxing, told me I needed rest, that I was agitated. I wasn't agitated. I was aware. I thought of Richard alone in his office, clutching his chest, dialing the number of the one person he believed would save him. And I thought of Daniel looking at the phone and choosing not to answer. I cried that night, not out of fear, but because I finally understood how little I meant to him. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was an obstacle. But then I thought of Marissa, her hands, her laugh, her quiet promise, and I knew she wouldn't let this go. The next day, a social worker came in, a young man named Kevin, clipboard in hand, voice soft. I'm here to talk. Mrs. Walsh, just routine questions. Don't waste your breath, I said. You're not here for my benefit. You're here to validate paperwork. He blinked. That's not true. Then let me make a phone call. He hesitated. That's not permitted without physician approval. I stared at him. So much for rights. He left 15 minutes later, rattled. I hadn't given him what he expected. I didn't rant. I didn't cry. I didn't perform. I told the truth. Calm, clear, cold. They wanted a breakdown. I gave them composure. Later that evening, while pretending to nap, I heard voices outside my door. She's lucid, one nurse whispered. Honestly, more coherent than half the staff. Orders are orders, the other replied. A flicker of hope. Not everyone was blind, but I was still trapped. And time was running out, still. I held on to one thing I knew for certain. Daniel had underestimated me. And he had no idea what I'd taught Marissa. The first time Marissa tried to see me after they moved me, they turned her away. She told me that later. She had rushed in during her shift, still in her scrubs, her badge swinging, her heart probably pounding harder than she'd ever admit. She went straight to the front desk and asked where I had been transferred. She was met with blank stares. Mrs. Walsh is no longer under your care, then. The matter is being handled internally. She told me. Her hands started shaking. That she felt like she was about to scream but didn't. She knew better than to show it. Marissa was smart. She understood the game they were playing. She just didn't realize yet how deep Daniel's reach went. So she started digging. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was on a mission. She called James Palmer, the lawyer I'd been working with, and insisted on meeting him. When he hesitated, she sent him the letter I had written and sealed weeks earlier, the one I tucked away in my drawer like a seed I prayed would sprout when the time came. That letter changed everything. James called her back within an hour. He met her in his office the next morning. And from what she later told me, she didn't waste a single second on small talk. She told him everything: the change in my will, Daniel's pressure, how I was suddenly declared unstable out of nowhere. But she also brought something else. A voice recording. 2 weeks earlier, during a routine hallway conversation, Daniel had been talking to the facility administrator near the nurse's station. He didn't notice Marissa standing nearby, phone in her coat pocket, accidentally recording while she reached for a pen. In the recording, his voice was clear, direct, damning. She's just lonely, easy to manipulate. That nurse, she's conning her. Once I have her declared unfit, the will goes back to the way it should be. That alone was enough to set off alarms. But Marissa didn't stop there. She found Kristen, the night shift nurse who had seen Daniel inside the facility after hours. Kristen was hesitant, scared of losing her job. But Marissa told her the truth. Staying silent meant being complicit in something darker than negligence. Kristen signed a statement. Then came the medical records. Marissa noticed inconsistencies in the evaluation ordered by Dr. Levin, dates that didn't line up, statements supposedly made by me that I never said, notes about medications I was non-compliant with even though I had never refused a single pill. Until they moved me to the psychiatric wing, she gathered everything: statements, recordings, medical inconsistencies, and brought them all to James together. They filed for an emergency hearing. They called it what it was, elder abuse, and while all of that was happening outside, I was still locked inside that unit, pacing my room like a caged animal. Every day they brought me pills. Every day I refused them. My chart filled up with words like uncooperative and defensive, as if I were being difficult for the fun of it. But I knew the truth. They wanted me numb. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me gone. I had no idea what Marissa was doing. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it. But I believed in her. She was the only person in that building who had ever looked at me and seen a human being. Not a patient. Not a burden, not a bank account. So when they finally told me I had a hearing scheduled with a judge, I knew she'd found a way through. The morning of the hearing, they let me shower. They gave me clean clothes. Offered coffee I didn't trust. A nurse brushed my hair, trying to make me look presentable, but I wasn't thinking about appearance. I was preparing for war. They transported me in a van with tinted windows like I was some kind of criminal. Two orderlies sat up front talking about their lunch plans while I sat in the back, hands folded, pretending not to hear. But I heard it all, the old lady with the nurse problem. She's faking it for attention. Jokes, snickers, dismissive remarks. I memorized every word. Soon, their words would matter. The courthouse wasn't far, just a small gray building with a broken flag outside. And too many empty parking spaces. I was led through a side entrance. Away from the public, like I was something shameful that needed hiding. But inside that small courtroom, I saw her, Marissa. She sat near the front in a simple navy blouse, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she saw me enter, her eyes flooded with emotion. She didn't speak, just nodded, silently saying, "I told you I'd come." And then I saw Daniel, sitting with his lawyer, smug as ever. Suit to perfect, posture to rehearsed. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He thought he had already won. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, sharp eyes. No nonsense tone. She looked at me as if she hadn't made up her mind yet. That gave me hope. James stood and began. He laid out the facts slowly, methodically, like a scalpel, not a hammer. He presented Marissa's audio recording, Kristen's statement, the discrepancies in my medical records. Then he played the tape. Daniel's voice filled the room, cold, calculated, ugly. She's just lonely. Easy to manipulate. That nurse, she's conning her. Once I have her declared unfit, the will goes back to the way it should be. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The words were already in the air, staining everything. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. I may be old, I said, but I am not confused. I am not senile. And I am not finished. I looked directly at Daniel. I trusted you. I loved you. I forgave you for so many things I shouldn't have. But when you let your father die, when you ignored his call for help so you wouldn't be held responsible for your own mistakes, you crossed a line I cannot and will not forgive. Gasps echoed through the room. Daniel turned pale. I continued, my voice firm. This isn't about money. It's not even about the will. It's about dignity. It's about being seen, being heard, being human. And if my life is worth nothing more to my own son than $, then I will spend what's left of it with someone who treats me like I matter. Marissa's eyes welled with tears. She reached for a tissue quietly. The judge called for a recess. When we returned, her voice was firm, resolute. Mrs. Walsh is of sound mind and full legal capacity. This court finds the petition for guardianship filed by Mr. Daniel Walsh to be baseless and frankly disturbing. She turned to Daniel. You should consider yourself lucky she doesn't press criminal charges. And just like that, I was free from the walls, free from the silence, free from the son who had turned his back on everything good and decent outside the courthouse. Marissa hugged me. Not tight, not suffocating, just enough. Just right. You did it, she whispered. No, I said. We did, but deep down, I knew the real battle was only beginning. The law had cleared my name, but I wasn't done clearing my legacy. The morning after the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror in my room at the facility. The same beige walls, the same small window letting in slivers of morning light. The photo of Richard and me tucked in the corner of the vanity, but something had changed. I had changed. They tried to break me. Daniel tried to erase me. But I was still here. Marissa came in just before breakfast, carrying a tray with pancakes and fresh strawberries, my favorite. She said nothing at first, just set the tray down and pulled up a chair. Victory pancakes, she said. I chuckled. We earned them that day. The staff treated me differently, a little more respectfully. Some avoided eye contact, especially those who had followed orders blindly. Others offered quiet, nervous apologies. I didn't hold grudges, but I remembered everything. That Daniel, on the other hand, had vanished. No calls, no visits. Not even a lawyer sent to clean up the mess. He was hiding, hoping to wait out the storm, but I wasn't done with him. That same week, I finalized the adoption paperwork with James. Marissa Carter officially, legally became my daughter. On paper, in court. In heart. The process was surprisingly simple. The judge asked if I truly wanted this. Yes, I said, without hesitation. Because what makes someone family isn't DNA, it's who shows up when you're broken. It's who fights for you when everyone else walks away. Daniel found out about the adoption the following Monday. He sent me an email, just one line: "You'll regret this." I deleted it. He wasn't angry because I gave Marissa my money. He was angry because I gave her my love. The next few days, I felt lighter. I spent more time outside. I laughed more. I helped Marissa plan Mia's birthday, an outdoor party with balloons, cupcakes, and paper crowns. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found an old scarf Richard had given me. I held it against my cheek and closed my eyes, remembering his voice, his quiet strength. "I hope I made you proud," I whispered. And in that moment, something inside me settled, something that had been restless for far too long. But the peace didn't last. One morning, James called. "Daniel is trying to contest the will again," he said, this time claiming undue influence. "He's hiring a new team. He wants it all reversed." Of course he did. A snake doesn't change. He just sheds his skin. But this time, I was ready. We had recordings, witnesses, medical proof of my mental clarity, legal guardianship of my own estate, and now we had the adoption. He couldn't touch a single dollar without unraveling the entire web he'd spun. Still, the anxiety returned, because no matter how strong I felt, part of me still hurt. He was my son. He was my baby once. And now he was the villain of my story. That night, I sat with Marissa in the garden. We watched the sun dip below the trees, casting long golden shadows across the grass. Mia ran around chasing fireflies, her laughter drifting through the air like music. "I wish I could say, I don't care," I said quietly. "But I do. I still care." Marissa didn't respond at first. She reached for my hand, warm, steady. "You don't have to stop caring," she said. "You just have to stop letting him hurt you." And she was right. I would always love the little boy Daniel once was. But I would no longer mourn the man he had become. I had a new chapter to live now, and a new family to live it with. The final battle was coming, and when it did, I'd be ready to close the book. The courtroom felt colder this time. Maybe it was the tension in the air. Or maybe it was because I knew exactly what Daniel was trying to do again. He wasn't just contesting the will, he was trying to erase everything I'd done. Every step I'd taken to protect my name, my dignity, and the one person who had stood by me when everyone else disappeared. Marissa sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, now my legal daughter. Her hands were steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Like she was ready to spring to my defense at any moment, like a soldier. Daniel, dressed in another expensive suit, didn't glance my way. His new lawyer, polished, arrogant, tried to paint a picture of manipulation. He claimed Marissa had preyed on an elderly woman, that I'd been coerced, that none of my decisions could be trusted. They played the age card. They played the vulnerable senior card, but they forgot one thing: I was still alive, still present, still powerful. I stood when called. My voice was clear, strong. I made every decision with full knowledge of what I was doing, I said, looking directly at the judge. And I stand by them. I changed my will not out of confusion, but out of clarity. I chose to give my legacy to someone who earned it, not someone who assumed he was entitled to it. The opposing lawyer smirked. "And what about your son? You're saying he deserves nothing?" I didn't flinch. "I'm saying he deserves exactly what he gave me in the last years of my life." Silence, distance, disregard. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Then James took the floor. He presented the adoption papers, legal, complete, airtight. He presented Marissa's years of service, her spotless record, her unwavering loyalty. He reminded the court of Daniel's previous attempt to have me committed. And then he played the final blow, the audio recording again, Daniel's voice, smug and unfiltered, talking about manipulating the system to reclaim the will. The judge leaned back, folded her arms, and sighed. "I've seen a lot of ugly family disputes," she said. "But this is different. This is calculated cruelty masked as concern." She turned to Daniel. "Mr. Walsh, not only do I deny your petition, but I am referring your behavior to the State Bar Association for review. If this courtroom allowed emotional damages, you'd owe your mother far more than money." I couldn't help it. I let the tears fall. Not from sadness, but from release. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. But I didn't stop. Marissa and I walked hand in hand to the car. We didn't need a statement. We didn't need the world to understand, because we understood. Back at the facility, I packed my things for the last time. Not in secret, not in fear, but with joy. We were moving into a small house just outside of town, a modest cottage with a backyard and a garden I could tend again. Marissa called it ours. Mia had already picked out where her swing set would go. As I zipped up the final suitcase, I glanced around the room that had once felt like a prison. It was just a space, now a chapter that had served its purpose. Before we left, I placed the old photo of Richard and me into my bag. I looked at his face, his smile. I kept my promise, I whispered. I didn't let him take everything. Outside, Marissa honked gently from the car. I took one last look, then closed the door behind me. And just like that, I walked out, not defeated, but reborn. Not forgotten, but chosen. The sun was warm on my face as we pulled into the driveway of our new home. It wasn't large or fancy. Just a simple cottage with pale blue shutters and a porch swing squeaking in the breeze. But to me, it felt like a palace because this time, I had chosen it. No one had dragged me here. No one had packed my things without asking. I came on my own terms, and I brought with me the only people who had truly stayed. Marissa helped me out of the car while Mia ran ahead, laughing as she announced which bedroom she wanted. There were daisies in the front yard already blooming. I smiled. Richard would have loved this place. I hadn't heard a word from Daniel since the ruling. No calls, no emails, nothing. Part of me kept waiting for a final plea, or maybe an apology, but none came. And that silence said more than any words ever could. We unpacked slowly, savoring each moment. I placed Richard's photo on the mantel. Marissa hung up drawings Mia had made in school. We filled the kitchen with smell: cinnamon, basil, fresh bread. Life returned to my bones in ways I didn't know I still needed. A week later, a letter arrived. Not from Daniel, from his lawyer. It was a formal notification. Daniel had filed for bankruptcy. Apparently, his reputation had taken a hit after the court hearing. His real estate ventures had started to crumble. Investors pulling out. Word had gotten around, you can't hide a heart like his forever, and just like that, the man who had tried to steal everything from me lost everything himself. I didn't smile when I read it. I didn't gloat. But I did exhale deeply, fully, for the first time in years. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's watching your enemy fall without ever having to lift a hand. One afternoon, I sat on the back porch with Marissa. The air smelled like fresh grass and warm soil. She was reading, and I was crocheting something for Mia's room. You ever regret it? She asked quietly. Giving me so much? I looked up, surprised. I didn't give you anything, I said. You earned it. Every bit of it. She looked down, her eyes glassy. No one's ever said that to me before. I reached over and took her hand. Well, get used to it. I smiled. You're stuck with me now. That night, I dreamed of Richard. We were dancing in the living room, slow and silly like we used to. He was wearing those ridiculous plaid slippers, and I could feel his hand on my waist like he'd never left. When I woke up, birds were singing outside. The sun filtered through the curtains. I could hear Mia giggling in her room, and I realized something. This was home, not the house. Not the bricks or the furniture. The feeling. The peace. The laughter. The love. I had found my family, not in blood, but in the ones who chose to stay. Daniel had lost a fortune, but I had gained a future. And I wouldn't trade places with him for all the money in the world. The garden was full of light. Golden afternoon sun spilled across the rows of fresh soil, where I had just planted a handful of wildflower seeds with Mia. Her tiny hands had been covered in dirt. Her face smudged, but her laughter pure. Unfiltered joy still echoed in the breeze. I sat on the porch swing now, a glass of lemonade in my hand, watching her run across the lawn with her little butterfly net, chasing nothing in particular. And Marissa, she stood barefoot in the grass, smiling, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. She looked younger these days, lighter, like some invisible weight had finally lifted from her shoulders. This was peace. This was healing. This was everything I'd been denied, and everything I had chosen to build with the pieces left behind for so long. I thought growing old meant losing pieces of yourself. I thought it meant being erased, made invisible. I never imagined I'd be fighting for my name, my worth, my voice. But I did fight, and I won. Not with rage or revenge, but with truth, with grace, with clarity. After the ruling, Daniel never reached out again. Not to apologize, not to explain, just silence. And I let it stay that way. There's a kind of mourning that comes with letting go of someone you once loved unconditionally. It's quiet, slow, and private, but it's necessary. I don't hate him. I don't wish him pain. I just don't give him the power to define me anymore. Instead, I poured my energy into planting, into baking, into showing Mia how to make her first peach cobbler, into helping Marissa get her nursing certification upgraded, so she could open a small private care service from home. We became something more than a household. We became a family, a real one, built not from shared blood, but from shared battles, from loyalty, from love in its purest form. Every morning I wake up and choose this life. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. And because I fought for it. I thought my story was ending the day Daniel wheeled me into that facility. But I was wrong. That was just the beginning of my final act, the one I got to write. The one that ends with my hands in the dirt, laughter in the air, and peace in my chest. As the sun dipped lower, I reached over and picked a single sunflower from the pot beside me. My favorite. Richard once told me sunflowers always turn toward the light. I think I finally understand what he meant. Because even after everything, the betrayal, the silence, the isolation, I found the light again. I let it find me and I followed it home. The blood may have abandoned me, but the love saved me. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.